Well, hello, good people of the internet. To borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, I'm making this video not so much in response, but to add to the wonderful Canvas system tutorial for Daz Studio iRay presented by Sickle Yield. She did a fantastic job with that tutorial, and there were just a few things that I wanted to add, as I have been using canvases for quite some time, and I pretty much use them in everything that I do. Sorry, I'll try not to do that thing a lot. Where I diverge from what Sickle Yield presented is in how I set up my canvases for my various light sources. Sickle Yield used a single light and created a light group, and that was sufficient because it was a single light, I believe, in her render. In this particular example that I have here, I have multiple lights. I'm using one of the light presets from Painter's Lights, which I also use in almost everything I do. So there is a 3-point light setup here, in that we have a main light, an eye highlight, and a backlight. And you'll see I have created a canvas, a light group specifically canvas, for each of those lights. Now, when I created the canvas itself, I had an option to create a node. And a node tells the render engine what object you are specifically defining as your light source for that canvas. So for this main light group, I am using a node that I called main when I created it. If you look down here, this is my list of nodes that I have for my render. And here, if I open up the main node, you will see that the spotlight called main is the only thing selected. That, for this canvas, will render only the main light. And there is a canvas for the eye light, which calls the eye node. And this one, which I did not properly label, for the backlight, which calls the backlight. If you notice, also I have several other light group canvases, and this is another point where I diverge from Sickle Yield. Sickle Yield used an emissive canvas right here, emission canvas, for her emissive lights. I tried that before and I didn't care for the result, but there is another way to do that. Again, I'm going to stress here, another way. It's just a different way. I'm not saying that this is right and the emission layer is wrong. I'm going to try out the emission layer again and see if I get different or better results, or maybe it's just another thing to add to my tool set to sometimes use the emission canvas. But, right, I have my ceiling lights, which you can't really see in the render, but are here in this wonderful prop, which is Parkside Loading Bay by Jack Tomlin. So I have just 2 of these strip lights in my group for emissive lights. Then I have table left over here, which is actually from Sickle Yield and Fuseling, I believe. Their FSL Fantasy Clutter. This wonderful setup over here, and probably a quarter of the things on the desk here are also from that same setup. But here in the table left light group, if we look at the node for that, which again I didn't label, but is NL1, over here in my list, I believe that's this here. Yes. So we have the prop with several other props parented to it, and if you look, each of the candle holders has a candle, and I have selected each of those candles as a light source for this node. So if I rendered this, which I'm not going to do because it will take a very long time, I would end up with multiple canvases showing the specific light sources. Now I'm going to open Photoshop here. And I don't want to get into a discussion about the relative merits of paid for software. I know people have their arguments. I don't want to have them. This is the tool that I prefer, and I think that it handles the native output of EXR files much better. But again, that's my preference. You may have a different preference, equally as valid. But if I go to the output that I specified, I've already done some work here and I composited this image, but here are the various layers that I rendered for that image. Right, and we're going to look at that table left in particular, that light group. Okay, if I just open that EXR image, right, I get a very overexposed image, but you can see that's where the light is coming from, that table left. And if we come here to HDR toning, which is basically tone mapping, which iRay will do for you in render, but I prefer to do after, and we adjust my exposure, you can see those are the only lights that are being affected. Now I already have a Photoshop file here that I composited earlier that has all of the layers in it. Oh, it looks like I flattened it. I don't normally do that. I'm disturbed. Okay. Usually I will not have flattened all the layers, but it appears in this case I did. So I'm going to really quickly just open a different image, but demonstrating the same things. Okay, this is a different image, but done with the same effect, right? I have multiple layers over here, right? And if we turn off some of these, we turn off the post work that I did, that I painted in, we can look at the individual layers. Right, we have a single layer here. This is actually the environment layer, so it's the environment light peeking in through the windows here. This one here is a front light on the subject. Then we have a backlight on the subject. This is actually an off-screen light. I wanted to add this red glow, and I actually post-worked in that fog onto this layer to give it that red color. And then we have, for this image, one emissive layer, which is just this magical item here. Now if you notice, each of these layers I have set an individual opacity for to get the blend of lights that I wanted in my final image, which ended up being this here, which if you notice doesn't look an awful lot different from here, other than, right, my post work. Okay, that's about it. It's my my first time doing video like this. I hope that I'll get better at it. I kind of did this on the fly. I didn't make any notes and just wanted to have at it. Sickle Yield is a wonderful presenter, and she adds a lot to the community with her tutorials. So again, I'm not this is not a response to or anything like that. This is just in addition to some points on how you might approach it slightly differently, and I hope it taught you something.